Min-jae Kang collapsed before the applause finished. 1 second, he stood beneath the white glare of the hospital foundation lights in a charcoal suit that made men twice his size lower their eyes. The next, the glass in his hand shattered across the marble, and his body folded hard enough to send a gasp through the ballroom. Nia moved first. Her heels cut through the silence, and she dropped to her knees beside her husband while red wine and crystal spread around them like a bad omen. But the room did not move for her. A nurse reached for Min-jae and asked too briskly, "Family only, please." An elder from the Kang circle stared at Nia's brown hand, gripping his wrist as if it did not belong there. Two women in silk whispered without lowering their voices. One called her the American wife. The other looked Nia up and down like she had been invited for decoration and forgotten after dessert. Then the danger sharpened. While the medical team rushed Min-jae toward the private elevator, one of his captains tried to take the phone from Nia's hand. Another man asked where the emergency authorization papers were. Aunt Sun-hee said, cool as ice, that these things should be handled by blood. The doors began to close with Min-jae unconscious inside, his pulse falling under hospital light, his empire already shifting around him. And just before the elevator sealed, the doctor looked at Nia with practiced sorrow and said the words that turned the air to ash. It may be terminal. The ballroom seemed to tilt. Nia did not cry in public. She stood, shoulders squared, throat burning, and followed the gurney anyway. Behind her, the whispers grew louder. Ahead of her, Min-jae lay still as stone. What no one in that hallway knew was that he heard her voice when she called his name, and for the first time since he planned the test, uncertainty entered his chest. The woman he expected to count his money was running toward his death instead. The private floor smelled of antiseptic, expensive flowers, and fear. Rain ticked softly against the long black windows of St. Vincent's executive wing, while the Kang family gathered in cashmere and quiet hostility. Nia stood outside Min-jae's room, in a cream blouse stained at the cuff from his blood, reading every medical page the doctor handed over. She caught the dosage schedule, the falsified optimism in the nurse's smile, the way the attorney kept angling documents away from her. Competence sat on her like armor, but they kept treating her like a temporary inconvenience. Aunt Sun-hee finally took the papers from the lawyer and said, "Until we understand the situation, Mrs. Kang should rest. These decisions are complicated." Nia lifted her face slowly. "Then it was a mistake to bring me simple people." The attorney flinched. So did the nurse. Sun-hee's mouth tightened. "This is not your neighborhood clinic. This is family business." Before Nia could answer, a weak voice came from the doorway. "It is my business," Min-jae said. He should have looked small in the pale blue hospital bed, with monitors glowing around him and exhaustion shadowing his sharp features. Instead, the room changed shape around his stillness. Every person turned. Every sound died. His eyes found Nia first. "Bring those papers to my wife," he said. The lawyer hesitated for one fatal second. Min-jae's voice never rose. "Now." The attorney crossed the room and placed the documents in Nia's hands. Sun-hee tried to speak, but Min-jae cut through her with terrifying calm. "If I cannot sign, she signs. If I do not wake, she decides. Anyone who forgets that, forgets me." It landed like a blade laid gently on the table. No one tested it twice. That was the first time the room reversed in front of witnesses. A woman they had kept at the edge was suddenly the axis. Later, after the family withdrew and the rain deepened into a silver sheet across the windows, Nia adjusted his blanket without asking for permission from anyone but him. Her fingers were steady, her jaw was not. He watched her too closely then. That had been part of the plan. He had wanted to see greed, relief, calculation. Instead, he saw a woman fighting herself just to stay upright. And something in that truth began to threaten the lie. The loyalty test had barely begun, but Min-jae was already afraid of the answer. Hospitals flattened time until day and night became a rumor. By the third morning, Nia had learned which machine clicked before the nurse came, which specialist lied with too much kindness, and which guard outside the door secretly reported to Sunhee. She slept in the chair by Min-jae's bed with her spine straight and one hand near his call button, as if pride itself refused to let her fold. At dawn, she brought in a thermos from home, and the room filled with the warm scent of honey pear tea, soft and golden against the cold bleach of the floor. He noticed it immediately. So did the old scar inside him. His mother used to make that tea when the household shook with danger, when men came and went speaking in lowered voices, and his father answered every kindness with suspicion. Min-jae had not tasted it in years. Nia poured it into a paper cup and held it out. "You still hate hospital coffee," she said. He took the cup because refusing it would have required more strength than he had expected to need. That night, long after the nurses changed shift and the city lights turned the windows into black mirrors, he spoke before he could stop himself. "If I were nothing," he asked, staring at the ceiling, "would you have stayed?" It was not part of the script. It was the first private crack in the man everyone feared. Nia looked at him for a long time. The monitor cast green light across her cheekbones. "If you were nothing," she said quietly, "you would not be you." He turned his head toward her. She did not soften the truth. "And if you think money is all that keeps a woman in a room like this, then you have been loved badly." The words struck deeper than any threat. He had meant to test her. Instead, she had found the wound beneath the suit and touched it without cruelty. He slept after that, but not well. Every time he woke, she was there, reading charts, taking calls, refusing to leave when guards suggested it. Once she tucked the blanket around his shoulders with a gentleness so unguarded it made his chest feel unfamiliar. By morning, June, one of his captains, was already whispering that a dying man should secure his assets before sentiment ruined judgment. Min-jae heard it from behind half-closed eyes. The tea on his tray had gone cold, but the lie around him had started to burn. The more Nia cared for him, the more dangerous his deception became. After a week, the doctors recommended private recovery in the penthouse. The Kang residence sat above the city like a verdict, all smoked glass, rare stone, and quiet wealth polished until it reflected nothing human. Yet, Nia moved through it with the same precision she had used in the hospital. She changed the staff rotation. She sent away the orchids because their perfume fought his headaches. She turned the formal sitting room into a recovery space with low lamps, linen throws, and the sound of rain-filtered jazz, so soft it barely touched the walls. In the marble kitchen, honey pear tea simmered again, fragrant with steam and memory. The luxury around her only sharpened the contrast when she slipped into the small service alcove to take calls from her old clinic on the south side. There, among chipped mugs and grocery lists clipped to a corkboard, her voice sounded like the woman she had been before diamonds and bodyguards started shadowing her steps. She approved payroll. She arranged medication for a patient's mother. She told a volunteer not to cancel the children's vaccination day. Power fit her in every room. Some people still acted shocked by that. Min-jae watched from the doorway more than once, hidden by silence. He had married strength because he respected it. Somewhere along the line, he had mistaken respect for safety and safety for love. Then the doctor made a mistake. When Nia reached for Min-jae's updated file, Dr. Han moved too quickly and almost knocked the folder from her hand. His smile came late. His explanation came earlier than needed. And on one lab report, the date was wrong by 2 days. She said nothing. But that evening she held the page a second longer than usual. Her eyes narrowed. Her stillness changed. The test should have ended there. It did not. Min-jae saw suspicion enter the room like a new kind of weather. And for the first time he understood he might lose her for real. And if that chill reached the heart, the next hour only made it colder. Nia had started to notice the lie hiding under the luxury. The executive dinner was supposed to show unity. Instead, it revealed hunger. The penthouse dining room glowed under low amber light, with black lacquer, white lilies, and enough silver on the table to blind a weaker family. Men who had carried Min-jae's orders for years sat in tailored obedience, though their eyes kept drifting to the head of the table where illness had made a vacancy they wanted to imagine permanent. Naya entered in deep green silk, her hair swept back, her face composed enough to make the room restless. She took the seat halfway down, not because she belonged there, but because she knew the game well enough to let others expose themselves first. An older executive lifted his glass and said, "To Chairman Kang, and to the blood that will preserve his legacy." He did not look at her. Another man added, "The legal transition should remain with those raised for this life." The insult lay on the table in plain view. Black, American, not born into them, never enough for men who mistook tradition for entitlement. Nia set down her fork. "Then it is a mercy I was raised for harder things." A few faces hardened. One woman smiled into her wine. Min-jae, pale in a dark knit sweater, had been quiet until then. He wiped his mouth with a linen napkin and spoke with the same deadly calm he used when deciding the fate of disloyal men. "Stand." No one asked why. Chairs slid back. He stayed seated and looked around the room. "You will greet Mrs. Kang properly." Silence spread hot and humiliating for everyone except her. Then he continued, "The controlling interest in every legitimate company under my name has already been transferred into a trust she commands if I fail. Any man who cannot speak to her with respect can leave tonight and never return." That was the second public reversal, cleaner and crueler than the first. He did not raise his voice. He simply changed the air and made witnesses breathe it. One by one, they acknowledged her. Some with grace, some choking on it. Nia did not smile. She only met Min-jae's gaze across candlelight and polished glass. What flashed there was not gratitude, it was confusion. Because power he understood, but this looked almost like faith. Later, after the guests had gone and the city lights shimmered below like broken gold, she touched the back of a chair he had defended in front of everyone and wondered why a man who doubted her heart kept handing her his kingdom. The authority Min-jae gave her in public only made his private secret more unforgivable. The night the storm hit, the penthouse lost its shine. Wind rattled the tall windows. Thunder rolled through the skyline. The generators kept the lights low and steady, and the whole place smelled faintly of cedar, rain, and the honey pear tea Naya carried onto the balcony where Min-jae sat beneath a wool throw. Without the city noise, the silence between them felt stripped down to bone. She handed him the cup. He took it carefully. For a while, neither spoke. Somewhere below, sirens threaded through wet streets. Somewhere farther back, in a smaller apartment where the radiator hissed and the paint peeled, Nia remembered learning that love without respect always came with a bill. She had sworn never to pay it. Min-jae broke first. "My mother left when I was 16, he said. The confession came so quietly it almost vanished into the rain. This was the second private vulnerability, the one no one else would ever hear. His hands were steady around the cup, but his eyes had gone distant. "She told me men like my father were easier to survive than to love. Then she took every kindness in the house with her." Nia said nothing. He continued because stopping would have been cowardice. "My father taught me that loyalty spoken aloud was theatre. He believed only fear stayed. The rest?" He glanced down at the steam. "The rest could be bought until it found a better offer." She leaned back in her chair, arms folded, not unkind, not indulgent. "And you built your life around proving him right." His mouth moved once, almost a smile, almost pain. "You deserve better than a man who thinks like that," she said. There it was. Not surrender, Not reassurance. A line. He should have ended the deception then. The words rose to his throat and died there. Pride was a colder sickness than any disease he had invented. When she went inside, he sat alone with the tea growing cold in his hands. On the counter behind the glass, her phone lit up with a message from the clinic. On the coffee table, his forged lab reports waited like a loaded trap. Some truths arrived gently. This one was coming with teeth. By morning, Nia would find the one detail the lie could not survive. She found it in the dosage log. Not because the doctor slipped this time, and not because anyone confessed. She found it because Nia noticed patterns the way other people noticed weather. The medication schedule listed a drug that required weekly liver monitoring. His blood work showed no such testing. The nurse's notes mentioned side effects he never displayed. And when she called a specialist she trusted from her clinic, he went silent halfway through her questions and told her, very carefully, that the records did not read like a terminal case at all. The penthouse suddenly felt airless. She took the folder, her keys, and the bracelet box from her dresser and went to the old apartment she still kept on the south side above her first clinic office. The hallway smelled like fried onions, old paint, and somebody's cinnamon candles. The floors creaked, the radiator clanged. Nothing in that place lied about what it was. That was the choice moment. She could have taken the trust, the cars, the penthouse, the protection, and walked cleanly into a softer life on his money. She could have called the attorneys, taken everything he had placed in her hands, and left him choking on his own test. Instead, she chose herself. She left every account untouched. She brewed honey pear tea in a dented pot and sat by the window with the steam fogging the glass, while anger settled into something sharper than heartbreak. He had not tested her love. He had insulted her dignity. There was a difference, and it mattered more than the marriage certificate in her drawer. When Min-jae called, she let the phone ring out. When he sent security, she sent them away. When his final message arrived, it held only 3 words. Come home, please. Nia stared at the screen until it dimmed. He had spent weeks asking whether she loved him. He had never once asked whether he had earned the right to be believed. The wife he tried to measure had just become the one thing his power could not retrieve. The family council met without her, and that was its first mistake. They gathered in the hospital boardroom under sterile light and expensive art, smelling opportunity beneath Min-jae's still controlled silence. Rumours had already spread that Mrs. Kang had left. Men who had bowed 2 nights before now spoke with the false courage of people standing behind numbers and bylaws. An elder cleared his throat and said, "A woman who walks out under pressure cannot carry this family." Another added, "She was always temporary." The door opened before Min-jae answered. Nia stepped in, wearing a tailored black coat over a plain cream dress. No diamonds except her wedding ring. No apology in her face. The whole room shifted toward her like iron toward a magnet. She had only come for the final file she needed from Dr. Han, but disrespect had a way of summoning witnesses. The elder looked straight at her and said, "You should take the settlement and leave with grace." Min-jae rose. He had looked weak for weeks. Now the weakness vanished so completely that the boardroom seemed to inhale all at once. He walked to the head of the table with terrifying steadiness, put both hands on the polished wood, and let the truth fall where everyone could hear it. "There is no settlement," he said. "There is only my wife. And the failure is mine." Dr. Han went white. Min-jae did not glance at him. The illness was false. The disrespect toward her was real. Anyone who used my condition to diminish Nia Kang will answer for it outside this room and beyond this day. Shock tore through the council. Then he turned to Nia in front of every witness who had ever underestimated her. "You owed me nothing. They owed you respect. I should have protected that first." That was the 3rd public reversal, and the room knew it would be remembered longer than any contract. Men who had treated her as ornamental now had to watch the most feared man among them stand exposed by his own wrongdoing. And if that confession changed everything, the next truth changed him. Publicly admitting the lie was only the beginning of what Nia still needed to hear. She did not speak to him in the boardroom. She waited until night, until the penthouse had emptied of staff and consequence, until the city below looked like distant fire beneath a ceiling of cloud. In the kitchen, she set a kettle on the stove and sliced pears with slow, exact movements. Honey warmed in the pan. Cinnamon lifted into the air. The familiar scent wrapped the marble room in something almost gentle, which made what came next hurt more. Min-jae stood in the doorway and did not approach her without invitation. "I dismissed Han," he said. "June, too. Anyone who knew." Nia kept stirring. "That corrected your circle, not your marriage." His throat worked once. Steam curled upward. The kettle gave a sharp whistle. Nia reached for it at the same moment her phone buzzed on the counter. Her attention broke. The kettle tipped. Min-jae crossed the space in a single instinctive movement and caught the cast-iron handle with a bare hand, steady as steel, not a tremor in him. The kitchen went silent. That was how the motif became the knife. Honey pear tea had carried care from her hands to his bedside, from hospital chill to storm-dark balcony, from her old apartment to the home she no longer trusted. Now, in one impossible motion, it unlocked the final proof with brutal clarity. Nia stared at the kettle in his grip. Then she laughed once without humour. "You could have just asked me." He set it down carefully. For the first time since she had known him, Min-jae looked like a man stripped of every useful weapon. "I was ready to hear that you stayed for power," he said. "I did not know what to do if you stayed for me." She turned to face him fully. Her eyes shone, but her voice held. "Then hear me clearly. I did not marry you for your money. I did not marry you for your enemies either. I married the man who never lied about the danger outside our door. And you brought the danger inside." "Min-jae," he said, the apology raw and unhidden. She let the words sit between them. "You do not get to test a woman and call it love," she said. "If I stay after this, it will not be because I could not leave. It will be because you learned to be honest enough to deserve me." He bowed his head. Not to power, but to truth. For the first time, he understood that devotion without dignity was not devotion at all. By dawn, Min-jae would have one last chance to prove he loved her more than his fear. He did not beg. Nia would have despised that, and Min-jae finally knew the difference between surrender and respect. Instead, he acted with a precision no illness had ever touched. By sunrise, the forged medical record trail had been corrected. Every legal transfer made during the test stayed in place under her control unless she chose otherwise. Public statements went out to the companies, the hospital board, and the family offices. No one was to question Mrs. Kang's authority, and any insult disguised as tradition would be treated as disloyalty. Then he went somewhere no one expected him to go. The community clinic on the south side opened at 8, and the hallway still smelled like bleach, coffee, and old hope. The paint was worn around the door frames. Flyers leaned crooked on the bulletin board. A little boy in a red hoodie laughed in the waiting area. Nia stood behind the front desk in a simple camel coat, reviewing supply orders with one of her nurses, when the room went still. Min-jae had come without an entourage. No dark parade of cars, no wall of guards. Just him in a black coat, carrying a crate of boxed medical equipment paid for anonymously weeks ago and delivered now under his own hands. He set it down and waited until Nia looked at him. "I am not here to take you home," he said. The staff pretended not to listen and failed terribly. "I am here to say that home is wherever you are respected." The words landed softly, which made them stronger. He handed her an envelope. Inside was the deed to the building next door, purchased and transferred outright to the clinic under her foundation's name. No strings, no hidden leverage, just room to expand. "You built this before me," he said. "If there is any future with me, It stands beside what you built, not on top of it. Naya read the papers twice. The old ache in her chest shifted. He did not reach for her. He did not crowd her choice. He simply stood there, the most feared man in her world, waiting in full view of fluorescent lights and folding chairs, learning how to earn something money had never once bought him. When she finally stepped closer, the whole clinic seemed to exhale. "I am still angry," she said. "You should be. I do not forgive lies quickly. I will not ask you to." That was the first honest ground they had shared in weeks. She touched the lapel of his coat once, deliberate as a vow. Then start from there. Outside, winter sunlight broke across the clinic windows like something new. What began as a test ended as the only promise Min-jae had never been strong enough to make before. Spring came gently to the city, softening hard edges even where power still lived. The penthouse changed first. The recovery bed vanished. The medicine carts disappeared. In their place came warmer lamps, real laughter from the kitchen, and open windows that carried the scent of rain instead of antiseptic. Min-jae no longer hid behind control when silence would do harm. Nia no longer mistook restraint for honesty. They learned each other again, not as symbols, not as strategy, but as two proud people rebuilding something worth keeping. On the night the clinic expansion opened, the celebration filled both her world and his. Nurses from the South Side stood beside executives in black suits. Kids from the neighborhood ran through the new pediatric wing under strings of warm lights. Aunt Sun-hee arrived early, offered Nia a formal bow, and never made the mistake of speaking over her again. No one in the room forgot why. Min-jae waited until the speeches were done, and the crowd had settled into a hush. Then he crossed to Nia with 2 cups of honey pear tea. The scent rose golden between them. "This time," he said, handing one to her, "before the tea gets cold." It was the first time he had ever asked for truth without trying to corner it. Nia took the cup. Steam curled against her face. Around them, the clinic glowed with everything she had fought for: polished floors beside old framed photos, new machines beside familiar hands, luxury answered by purpose instead of replacing it. She looked at the man in front of her, all that power finally stripped down to honesty, and let herself smile. "I love you," she said, "but now you know love is not obedience." His eyes softened with the kind of relief only earned things gave. "I know. And if you ever test me again," she added almost sweetly, "you will recover in the guest house." For once, the feared boss of half the city laughed first. Then, because he had learned, he waited. Nia closed the last inch between them herself. He touched her only when her hand found his, and when his fingers folded around hers, the gesture held no possession, only promise. Outside, the city roared on. Inside, beneath warm light and the scent of pear and honey, their ending finally felt larger than the lie that nearly ruined it. It felt like a dynasty built honestly at last.